Meatloaf is a dish of ground meat mixed with other ingredients, formed into a loaf shape, then baked or smoked. The loaf shape is formed by either cooking it in a loaf pan, or forming it by hand on a flat baking pan. Meatloaf is usually made from ground beef, although lamb, pork, veal, venison, poultry and seafood are also used. The meatloaf has European origins. Meatloaf of minced meat was mentioned in the famous Roman cookery collection Apicius as early as the 5th century. Meatloaf is a traditional German, Scandinavian and Belgian dish, and it is a cousin to the Dutch meatball. American meatloaf has its origins in scrapple, a mixture of ground pork and cornmeal served by German Americans in Pennsylvania since colonial times. However, meatloaf in the contemporary American sense did not appear in cookbooks until the late 19th century. International variations. Austria. The Austrian meatloaf version is called fascierte Braten. Most of the time it is not filled, but it is wrapped in ham before baking it. Often it is served with mashed potatoes or with sauce Cumberland. Belgium. The Belgian version of meatloaf is called vleesbrood in Dutch and pan.de viande in French. It is usually served warm and can then be served with various sauces, but can also be eaten cold with a loaf of bread. Bulgaria. Rouleau Stefani. The Bulgarian rouleau Stefani meatloaf is similar to the Hungarian Stefania meatloaf, with hard-boiled eggs in the middle. Chile. Chilean meatloaf, known as asado alman, is a staple of southern Chile cuisine, especially in areas known for having been influenced by the arrival of German settlers during the 18th and 19th century. The most common recipe nowadays consists of ground beef, carrots, sausages, boiled eggs and breadcrumbs, cooked on the oven and normally served with a side dish of mashed potatoes or rice. Cuba. The Cuban meatloaf is called polpetta. It is made with ground beef and ground ham, and stuffed with hard-boiled eggs, and it is cooked on the stove top. The dish was brought to public attention, mistakenly referred to as a sausage, in the second episode of the 3rd season of The Cosby Show entitled Food for Thought. Czech Republic. In the Czech Republic, meatloaf is referred to as sekana. It is optional to put hard-boiled eggs, gherkins, or wienerwurst inside. Denmark. Danish meatloaf is called forlorenhær, mokhær, or fastbrød, ground meat bread, and is usually made from a mixture of ground pork and beef with strips of bacon or cubed bacon on top. It is served with boiled or mashed potatoes and brown sauce sweetened with red currant jelly. Finland. Finnish meatloaf is called lihamurik. It is completely based on the basic meatball recipe. The only spices used are salt and pepper. It is not customary to stuff lihamurik with anything. The usual side dish is mashed potatoes, and lihamurik is usually served with brown sauce. Germany. In Germany, meatloaf is referred to as hackbraten, fascierte Braten, or falsche mokhær. In some regions it often has boiled eggs inside. Greater Middle East. Kafta. Kofta is a similar dish which the mixture can be made into hamburgers and kebabs. It usually has parsley in it. Greece. In Greece, meatloaf is referred to as rolo and it is usually filled with hard-boiled eggs, although several other variations exist. Hungary. Stefania meatloaf or Stefania slices are a type of Hungarian long meatloaf baked in a loaf pan, with 3 hard-boiled eggs in the middle, making decorative white and yellow rings in the middle of the slices. Italy. In Italy, meatloaf is called polpetin and can be filled with eggs or ham and cheese. Jewish cuisine. In Jewish cuisine, meatloaf is called klops and can be served cold or hot. It is sometimes filled with whole boiled eggs. The source of the word might be German. Klops, meaning meatball. Palestine, Lebanon. Kafta or kofta is a Middle Eastern version of meatloaf. It is usually beef or lamb mixed with onions, parsley, and various spices, flattened into a square loaf and covered in either tomato sauce or tahini sauce. It is baked with the sauces and enjoyed with rice and potatoes. Kofta is also turned into kebabs and grilled during the summer months. Macedonia rolla is a similar dish to the chiefly Arab, though also Persian and South Asian, kofta. Ground beef is rolled and cooked until brown. It can be cooked with vegetables and various sauces. Mexico, it is known as albondigon and has a small size. Mongolia is served with mashed potatoes cooked over the ground meat. Philippines, there is a meatloaf dish called embutido made of well-seasoned ground pork, minced carrots, sausages, and whole-boiled eggs. The meat is molded into a roll with the sausages and hard-boiled eggs set in the middle. Another variation of the dish involves wrapping the meatloaf with pork mesentery. It is then wrapped in aluminum foil and steamed for an hour. The cooked embutido may be stored in freezers. It is usually served fried and sliced for breakfast. In some parts of the Philippines, the embutido is erroneously called morcon. However, the Filipino morcon itself is another dish, though prepared in a similar way. Poland, called pigs and rimska, a klops is made of ground pork and/or beef, onions and garlic, with obligatory hard-boiled egg inside. Puerto Rico. In Puerto Rican cuisine, meatloaf is known as albondigon. Puerto Rican-style meatloaf is made with ground pork, beef, turkey, adobo, Worcestershire sauce, milk, ketchup, potatoes, red beans, breadcrumb, parsley, with a hard-boiled egg in the middle. Romania. In Romanian cuisine, there is a meatloaf dish called drop, similar to other minced meat dishes in the region like the Bulgarian rouleau Stefani of the Hungarian Stefania meatloaf, the major difference being that it is always made with lamb organs and the hard-boiled eggs in the center of the drop are optional. South Africa. One of South Africa's most popular dishes is a form of meatloaf called barboti. Food in South Africa varies by region, and barboti is considered a Cape Town or Western Cape dish, but is so popular throughout the country that it is sometimes considered one of South Africa's signature dishes. It is a slightly sweet meatloaf flavored with curry spices, dried apricots and almonds, and is topped with whipped egg and milk topping, which when baked on top of the meat filling creates an egg topping. It arrived in South Africa several hundred years ago from the East Indies and became one of the signature dishes of Cape Town's Cape Malay community. Sweden. Swedish meatloaf is called kotforslimpa and is usually made from a mixture of ground pork and beef. It is served with boiled or mashed potatoes, brown sauce and lingonberry jam. Turkey. In the Turkish cuisine there is a meatloaf with vegetables dish called dalyan kofta. United Kingdom. In the UK there are regional meatloaf dishes known as hasla. United States. In 2007, meatloaf was voted the 7th favorite dish in the United States according to Good Housekeeping. During the Great Depression, cooking meatloaf was a way to stretch the food budget for families, using an inexpensive type of meat and other ingredients as leftovers, along with spices. It was popular to add cereal grains, bread or saltines to the meatloaf to stretch the meat. The tradition lives on with the merits of producing a lower-fat dish with superior binding and consistency. The meatloaf is typically eaten with some kind of sauce or relish. Many of these recipes call for pasta sauce or tomato sauce to be poured over the loaf to form a crust during baking. The tomato-based sauce may be replaced with simple brown gravy or onion gravy, but the meatloaf is prepared in a similar manner. Barbecue sauce, tomato ketchup, or a mixture of both tomato ketchup and mustard may also be used. American meatloaf may be garnished with plain ketchup or a meatloaf sauce consisting of ketchup and brown sugar mixed. Another variety of meatloaf is prepared by frosting it with mashed potatoes, drizzling it with a small amount of butter, and browning in the oven. The meatloaf is normally served warm as part of the main course, but can also be found sliced as a cold cut. Meatloaf can also be considered a typical comfort food and is served in many diners and restaurants today. Vietnam. The Vietnamese meatloaf version is called Beao. It's boiled rather than baked or smoked. There are many versions of Beao that differ by the ingredients used.